Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MicroCamp Themes and Plugins panel. And this evening, I'm joined by Manton and Amit. We'll be fielding questions, anything that was sent in ahead of time. And we're also fielding questions over the chat. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat room, and we'll be more than happy to pass them around the panel. I think before we take some questions, Manton, I wanted to ask you in terms of, the themes and plugins. I mean, obviously they've been taking off in a huge way, and it's a very exciting and part of Micro.blog that I think, is gaining some traction and well deserved. So I'm curious, where do you see the plugins and themes, heading, now and going into the future? Is there any room for further development and perhaps in something like newsletter theming, for example? Is that something that could ultimately be made into a plugin?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot we could do. I mean, it started really as a better way to just have different themes that are like styles for your blog. But of course, with a plugin, you can do more than that. You can just override like individual pages, just add and include of something in JavaScript. And I think we can go even further than that for sure and do a lot. I mean, if you look at the WordPress community, plugins can do all sorts of things. Like they're almost not limited, for better or worse, in what they can do. They can hook into all sorts of different pieces, and I think we can go more and more that direction within limits probably. But just this switch from like the built-in themes, when we started with themes in Micro.blog, I basically had to add themes myself to Micro.blog, which of course doesn't scale well. And now we have a better system for other people adding themes that are just automatically included and that people can use. So definitely in the right direction. Yeah, newsletters I think is a great example of something we could make accessible to from a plugin.
Perfect. And was it? Oh, now I've lost. I had a question in my mind, and now I've lost it.
Sorry, I rambled on too much.
No, that's okay. Maybe it'll come back to me. I did have one question that was sent to me a little bit earlier. Do people who can make plugins make them because they have a use for them, or because a certain number of people are interested in the plugin or the theme, or both?
That's a good question. I mean, Amit, jump in too if you have some, like from your perspective. I would say most people are building them first because they want to, and then other people could also benefit. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think with plugins, right? I think both, especially plugins, right? I think it comes with the need first, right? So typically, the plugin that I built, the post tracks, was something that I actually needed, right? So it was something that I thought it might be a good to have, right? So I basically built it in my blog first, and then I realized how simple it is to move it as a plugin or publish it as a plugin, and actually. It is only when you see how simple it is to move that single HTML to a plugin that you realize, okay, everything that I'm building can be actually published as a plugin. So I think it comes from the need first, that I want a particular feature to be there on my blog, and then that gets converted to the plugin, right? So I think even many of the plugins from Sven, for example, I think they started with, I think, Pete, you added email in Tufty, and that's how, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing the name correctly. I think that keeps coming up, but it was added to the theme first, and that's how we saw that, okay, this must be a good fit for all the blogs. And that's how it gets converted to plugin, I guess.
Yeah, I had added that in. I had seen that on 2 or 3 blogs that I follow, and when I built the Tufty theme, I wanted it to be part of the theme, and that's,
Yeah, exactly.
I had put it in there, and then, I noticed that Sven thought it was a great idea to, to separate it out so it could be incorporated into any theme, that's great, because I think that was when it kind of sparked, the creation of more plugins. As soon as Sven's email plugin, came into existence, it really did spark a lot of the other ones that were created, which is great.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know myself, like when I created Tufty, first and foremost, I wanted to have that theme available on my blog. It's a theme that if anyone read the blog post that I made on my site, just essentially my story, if you will, behind a theme, that it's a theme that I always wanted to use. And it's the platform that I first encountered it on was Jekyll. And, I had toyed around with using a Jekyll blog and decided for numerous reasons that I didn't want to, but it was a theme that I always wanted to be able to use. And once I settled on Micro.blog as a platform, I thought to myself, I really need to, to learn some Hugo code and to try porting that theme over. So, that's essentially it. It started as, as something I wanted to do for myself, because I like the theme, and it's, I wanted to learn some of the, the inners of Micro.blog and Hugo. But then, having the opportunity to share it as a theme with the community was gravy for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And listening to y'all talk, it makes me think also, or it kind of reminds me of some of the beginnings of plugins, because there's maybe even two sides of this. Of like, the one side is like, there's a theme that you want on your blog, and so you port it from another platform, or you create a theme from scratch, and it works well, and then you share it with other people. And then another side of that, actually, that has happened a few times, is maybe someone will send me like a feature request for a feature that could be in Micro.blog, but it could also be implemented as a plugin. And so one early example of that is the photos page. A lot of people want different tweaks to the photos page. Right. And so many people asked for the photos page, like, can I customize it with a category? So I just want a certain category to show up on there. And I could add that to Micro.blog, but you can imagine, like, okay, that's fine. There's another pop-up menu in Micro.blog for selecting a category. But then what if there's another feature and another feature? And before you know it, in the core part of Micro.blog, the screen has 20 checkboxes and all these different options just because someone asked for this feature. Whereas with a plugin, I can just take that one part of the idea. It comes out of Micro.blog and it's in a plugin, and then people can install it. And it doesn't clutter everything up, but it's still easy for people to use. So it's all, I really think, and there's probably other examples, but I feel like it really unlocks something where, you can take a theme, you can take a different feature, and as we add more abilities to plugins, hopefully even more things like that will be possible.
Absolutely. I think it's the simplicity of the Hugo platform too that allows us to see that, right? Everything is nothing but static pages eventually, right? And that kind of allows us to not really think of them as code features that you're adding to your platform, right? So for example, I've tried building a WordPress plugin for quite some time, but it is not that simple as, let's say, at least for me, I didn't find it as simple as, let's say, adding a extension to Hugo. And this experience has been there since I have even tried Hugo. And so I was publishing a blog with Hugo for quite some time, and the overall or the way the things are set up overall, I guess, with how they do the lookup at different places and how they're separated out, I think it allows this customizations really well, and I think Micro.blog benefits out of it. I think that was a very good decision, I would say, that we went with Hugo as a backend engine. So I think that is another point that helps the customizations.
Yeah, I'm really happy with that. And we started with Jekyll, And I can't remember now when we switched over to Hugo, but I'm really happy with that choice. I feel like it's a really nice foundation to build this kind of stuff on, because we can have that core like blog processing engine, and then different layers on top with themes and plugins and Micro.blog, UI and apps, and yeah. So far, so good.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I've noticed, in comparison to, the limited time that I played around with Jekyll, and then, looking at Hugo and learning more about Hugo and developing my two themes, is that Hugo is really powerful. I mean, it's the code is a little bit, I think it's more advanced than, something like Jekyll, which uses the liquid, templating engine. But with that code, even though it's more complicated, it is way more powerful under the hood. I mean, there's just so much that that Hugo can do. So I agree with what you said, Manton, that it gives us a good base to to work off of, and it's flexible and extendable through the all these different themes and plugins. And Pratik actually made a point. He said plugins can also help the core microblog to be lean. We don't want microblog to get bloated with features like WordPress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's totally right. Yeah.
And it's like the one thing that I've that when I looked at using WordPress was what if those plugins stop being developed? And it's now you're opening yourself up to potential security issues, and or something gets updated in a WordPress core, is that plugin even going to be functional? I'm not, I don't think that would be an issue here, unless it was a Hugo version that caused some kind of incompatibility. Is that the case, Manton? Or
yeah, I mean, it's there's a few things with that, and the Hugo version is definitely a bit of a rough spot for us right now, as we, when I started, moving Micro.blog to Hugo. And also, by the way, one of the benefits is Hugo is extremely fast, in addition to the things you said. And one of the things I like about that is, if anything in Micro.blog is slow, it's not Hugo's fault. Like, it's something that I can improve, like that I can have control over. And so I like having that foundation very, very fast, so that the other parts that could be faster, we have control over. But the version number, was kind of stuck in this old version number, and as people that have kind of paying attention to plugins have noticed, we now have 2 versions of Hugo that you can choose, and it's a little bit, it's not, just it could have been a smoother transition for some themes don't work with some versions of Hugo, and currently when you just start a new Micro.blog account, we're still defaulting you to the old version of Hugo. So I feel like we've learned a lot through this, these last couple months, and I'm just admitting, it could have been smoother with the different versions and compatibility. I think we can probably, once we take a step back from this, we can probably improve things further, whether that is just always staying on the latest version of Hugo and making sure that everything is compatible and well tested, or if possibly that is adding, a field to the plugin configuration that says, this plugin really would prefer running on a certain version of Hugo.
Certain version.
Yeah. I kind of hesitated to do that. I'd be curious what y'all think, but it's certainly doable.
Yeah.
Well, for myself, sorry, go ahead, Amit.
No, go ahead, Pete.
Okay. I'm just going to say, for myself, in terms of my 2 themes, apart from, I forget the specific change now, but Manton we had to change something with the call to those template files in a different location or a different name. But apart from that, I don't recall having any major issues with my 2 themes, from going from 0.54 to 0.91. But I think there were some other themes where people had to make a few more tweaks, but I don't think there was anything, hugely breaking in the process from what I recall.
Yeah. So I think we do have the I think it's a solved problem by Hugo itself, right? Because Hugo has the concept of themes, and even each theme can actually mention what version of Hugo it works with, right? There's a mean version parameter that is already there in every file that we are expecting with the theme. I think we just have to build a management sort of console of sort, right? Because we do have that data that every theme has already published. And I realized it when I was porting paper, right? And the paper theme. I thought it works with both the versions of the Hugo, and then I looked at the theme.toml closely, and I think it was clearly mentioned that it works with some a version that Hugo was, or rather Micro.blog had, which was older, right? So we already have that information. I think it's just about surfacing it out to that pane and possibly provide a filter, right? Because and plugin is, if we look at plugins, is just smaller themes in a way, right? There are sub modules which add static files. In that case, I think a similar sort of files can be used for plugins too. I think that information would come in handy, and it's a solved problem for Hugo, which we can build again a layer of management over for sure. That's
That
what
makes, yeah, that makes sense to me. And at the very least, full themes that already have
exactly
that set in the config, Micro.blog can notice that and automatically set your blog to use the right version. And then, like you said, we may need to figure out how to kind of trickle that down to other individual plugins that are not full themes, that are just overriding one thing. But that's a less of an issue probably, because those plugins aren't doing as much either.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We also had Pratik also asked in the chat. He says, "How do you decide what should be a core feature and what should be a plugin? And can a plugin be Sherlocked into the core at any point?"
That's a really good question. I think it's I was going to say it's unlikely that we would Sherlock a plugin because of the benefit of having it in a plugin. You know, keeping the core part of Micro.blog really lightweight. The flip side of that, though, is there is an example of something that it was kind of Sherlocked in a way, and that's the photos page. Actually, the photos page started as a JavaScript. It wasn't a plugin. We didn't have plugin systems yet, but it was something that we didn't build, and people could paste in, and they could, you know, that sort of thing. But it was so important and so obvious that that should be built into Micro.blog that it became a core feature. But I would say that's the exception. I think if a plugin is even if everyone loves it and, you know, many people are using the plugin, I would lean toward keeping it as a plugin. And because Micro.blog, I mean, it already does a lot. There is a lot in the UI. We're always kind of battling with like not, you know, making the UI bloated as we add features like the books or newsletters, or, you know, there's a lot of different things that it does. And yeah, I would want to keep things in plugins as much as possible if that's working well.
Couple of other questions here. If someone has never tinkered with their microblog appearance or functionality and is new to plugins and themes, what would you recommend they try first?
Question. Not sure. Does that like? I mean, I think one personally, I find a nice place to start tinkering, especially if you're thinking about a theme, is just like edit little bits of CSS to change little parts about your blog. And, you know, shout out to custom.micro.blog. There's a lot of tutorials and tips on there for, you know, overriding the header and adding a, you know, alignment of logo somewhere, you know, just different things you might want to customize. And I think that's a neat place to start. And then you can extract that out like into a theme or a plugin. The plugins can do some other things. And as we've talked about, they will be able to do more and more. And it's the help site does have some documentation that maybe will give some people some ideas. I think another thing that is a good use of a plugin is taking something someone else has built, like a JavaScript include, or, you know, something that's out there on the web that has nothing to do with Micro.blog, and packaging it into a plugin so it's easy to use in Micro.blog. And that might be another place to start if someone kind of wants to tinker and bring in some existing code. I don't know. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I think the first place, even what I started with, was primarily, I guess, the themes or plugins page that Micro.blog itself provides, right? I think when you create a new theme or create a new template with an existing thing, it is already changing that. I think the first thing is tinkering the existing theme that you have. I think that's the best place, because whatever you're creating post that, right, you could actually move it to a separate repository of sort and publish it as a plugin or a theme, right? There's nothing stopping you from publishing it out as a plugin or a theme, right? It's just about customizing what you already have and starting it from there, right? That is one place for smaller plugins for sure. And I think for larger themes, I think I'd written that document with exactly that perspective, wherein how do you create the themes from or port the themes that are written for Hugo specifically to Micro.blog. The idea was it is not that straightforward. For few of the themes it is straightforward, but there are many places that you have to make the changes. So I think it is just about taking a theme, installing it, and seeing what breaks, right? I think that's a good start, and nothing breaks with the test blog. I think the test the test blocks is the right place. You just install the theme and see what all is broken. I think the first thing that for sure we see out is the homepage. That for sure would look very different because it's not really built for all the short posts, etc., that have been written, right? So that's the first visible thing that you will realize that we need to fix. And I think the moment you start fixing that, I think that's it. I think you'll get the hang of how the things are set up and how they should be changed. I think that's the best way, for sure.
Yeah, and I may have misunderstood part of the question, so I think your answer was better. But what you said reminds me that I did make a YouTube video a while back where I walk through taking someone else's theme and fixing it so it works in Micro.blog. And like your example of the homepage of, making sure that short microblog posts are actually showing up and, adding a link because then maybe there's no title, that sort of thing. So that YouTube video is a little out of date, but I still think it might be useful for people getting started.
I think
just to complete that thought, I think another tangential thought to that, right? I think this has come in a few of the discussions too in between while we were discussing on the help Discord, right? So basically, it's about how do we further simplify it? I think there have been further thoughts because there are many things that are very specific to Micro.blog, and I think a base theme on which things can be built would be a good start. I think it will completely simplify what can be done with the themes. I think that there's a way for us to, for Micro.blog to go, right? With plugins, we understand there's management, console, etc. But themes too need another base theme that other themes can be built over, and which brings in everything that is custom to Micro.blog. I think that would be very useful to build new themes over. I think that is something that we'll have to look at.
I was going to say, with that, in line with that question, how, what to try in terms of learning about plugins, or in my case, what I want to mention is themes. There's a couple of good ways to do that, and actually, one of them is a tool that I use constantly. Like this app is my go-to in terms of theme creation. So the first resource is actually an online one, which is W3 Schools, and they have excellent online free online HTML and CSS courses that you can go through. It's an excellent resource. I'll actually put some links up in the chat. The other idea that I have as well, and this is again the software that I'm using, is the Inspect web browser on iOS. An iPad. Now it is you can run it on an iPhone, but I would not recommend that. It is not it's not an easy experience for coding a website. It's definitely better on the iPad, but you can load a site in the Inspect browser and then you can view the source code and actually start making changes. You can make changes to the HTML, you can make changes to the CSS, and especially with the latter, with changing the CSS, it's a good way to find out on the fly, start trying things out in CSS modification, and you'll see what happens live on the website. Now, you're not actually changing that person's website. You're just changing the website that's loaded in the, on your device. So the minute you make a CSS change, it'll be live on that cached version in Spec Browser. So it's a great way, not just for creating a theme, but for learning how to create a theme and to make changes on your own site, even if you didn't want to create a full-on theme. So those are the two options that I would recommend. I'll throw some links up in the chat for sure. There's another question in relation to this, and I guess we can all kind of answer that. Do you have plans for another plugin or theme? I do. I already have more than one theme that I'm planning. So there's my answer.
I had a theme that's in work, but it just got pushed out. I think there's a theme that I'm planning to port soon. Let's see how it goes. There was a plugin too that I wanted to bring out. It's just not working out. I think I have not been able to solve that problem. I'll again give it a try or reach out on help to see how it can be simplified further, because it does exist as a feature on Google, so it should be easier to bring on.
One thing that I have a few different themes that I've kind of tinkered with from time to move over. And one thing I'm increasingly hearing from folks is some more themes that are really, really good for photo blogs, for people who are only posting photos, where you want your homepage to really just be all photos. And so there's a couple that I was experimenting with, and I don't know if I'll finish and get those out, or maybe I'll help other people that are working on the same kinds of themes, but that's something I'm interested in. And plugins, I think there will always be little plugins that we can work on, and they can add, little features and customizations.
We have another question here too. What about people who want to use plugins or themes and not write them? Are plugins only for other plugin writers?
Oh, no. I mean, the goal of plugins, and I know we're getting kind of technical here with like Hugo versions and like, HTML and CSS and all these different implementation details, but really plugins are for to take a feature that would be hard and to make it easy to install. So there's a lot of flexibility if you create a custom theme yourself to go in, like we're talking about, in with Hugo templates and change things. Change the configuration. But for someone who doesn't want to know anything about how that works, the ability to have a plugin that anybody can install with one click and it adds a feature, that is really where most of this started. So some of these things will be kind of maybe more technical, and you might need to kind of figure out a little bit about Hugo Works, but I'm hoping that over time, most themes and plugins will not require any knowledge of the backend at all. That you see something you like, you install it, one click, your blog's updated with a new feature. And part of that also is the fact that plugins, and this is where Micro.blog's themes and plugins kind of drifts a little bit away from the default way Hugo thinks about things, is that plugins can provide a UI to configure themselves. So instead of having to mess with JSON configuration and things that just most people shouldn't have to mess with, you install a plugin and you get like a checkbox, or you get like a field you can enter. So that is a big goal of plugins, is to make things that were possible but difficult much easier.
Yeah, I think it's especially possibly the other way around, in the sense the plugins are written so that it is simpler for everybody to consume them and not really worry about how do you write them. I think that would be the idea, right? How do we make this feature readily available on all the blogs and not just a custom thing only on my blog?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Couple points I see in the chat room. Pratik, one thing that needs to be a plugin is the on this day. Right now, the JavaScript file is on Clever Devil's site.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, that's he also wrote the original, the photos page that I mentioned, and I think you're right. That should probably be wrapped up as a plugin. Would make it easier to install, instructions easier, and then there would be another copy of it. So we should look into that and look at the license and that sort of thing too. But I agree, that would be a nice example of a plugin.
It's so old that I didn't even realize it's not a plugin. I thought it was already it's a core feature, or because it was the first thing that I installed, because that was the first customization that I could get with the blog on Micro.blog. I didn't realize it's not a plugin.
Yeah, that goes way back. I'm not looking at it now, but I'm going to guess years back that was written. And like more recent plugins, like the Surprise Me, I think is kind of similar in a way. I love that plugin.
It's very similar. Yeah,
and it's a similar idea that it's nice to package it up in an easy way for people to use.
Yeah.
One thing I can say in reference to On This Day, I did contact I contacted Clever Devil just because I was adding On This Day functionality into the Hitchens theme. So if somebody wanted to use that particular plugin, even though it's not technically a plugin, they would be able to do that. So if they add On This Day to the theme, it will work properly. Now, I had to make some additions to the JavaScript in order to get the right theme elements that CSS could target. But when I reached out to him, he did point out that it was an MIT license, although I believe when I looked on the GitHub, there wasn't originally a license listed. So I think that's why I had reached out and said, just to confirm, is this MIT? And he did say yes. But certainly it would be a lot easier to have it local to Micro.blog as opposed to on his external site. Jason said personalized themes for the web-based timeline.
That's a whole nother thing that I agree. I see a lot of value in something like that. Themes currently and plugins currently are really, they're really, the focus is on Hugo and blog generation and not on the other parts of Micro.blog, like the timeline and other parts of the UI. But you could imagine that they will slowly creep over to the rest.
Yeah.
Speaking of creeping over, we have another question from Pratik. Would a Micro.blog plugin that allows you to embed tweets or Instagram photos be considered blasphemous?
I mean, people, it's a feature people would use. Hugo has built-in support, like a shortcode for embedding a lot of different social networks, including tweets and probably Instagram photos and other things. I haven't looked at it recently. And you could do something with a plugin that makes that even easier. I'm not sure, but
should work, right?
The shortcodes, shortcodes work right now. Yeah, if you know about them, you can just put them in a blog post and they will work. And so for people who are not familiar, Hugo shortcodes are like, they look kind of like HTML tags, but they have special markup, and then you say like Twitter and then like the tweet ID or something, and then when your blog is published, it'll automatically embed that tweet, for example. But there are other things that shortcodes can do, and plugins can also provide their own shortcodes. I know there's a couple plugins at least that do that create their own shortcodes. Actually, I just built one now that I think about it, for doing indie web RSVPs. I wrote a little plugin that creates a shortcode that makes it available to your blog, so that if you want to send an RSVP to an event, it's just kind of one line in your blog post, and it creates all of the HTML for you.
Yeah.
I'm just adding that the Hugo shortcodes to the chat as well, if anyone wants to read more about them. That was my. The shortcodes is interesting because this is kind of, it's a dilemma that I had with myself when I was creating the Tufty theme. only because shortcodes essentially are a little bit of a lock-in, because once you start using shortcodes, you have to keep using them. Now, you don't necessarily have to use them going forward on a new theme, but you would have to have the shortcode templates copied over into a new theme, even if you weren't planning on continuing to use them. So it is a debate that I had with myself, after creating them for the Tufty theme, and rightly so, because a lot of the formatting and the layout and the design, it would be impossible to do on without shortcodes. But when I created Hitchens, I thought, well, I don't really want, I don't want to lock people into using shortcodes on Hitchens. So for that theme, I didn't actually bring in any at all. I have a couple of workarounds that use essentially a comment tag, and using, putting a different word instead of the more tag to create a read later link. I used, I think for one of them, for example, it was epigraph. So, and I have a regex script, regex script in the theme. For those of you who don't know what regex is, it's called regular expression. So it's essentially a way of pinpointing, searching for specific text or a specific string, and when it sees that epigraph comment tag, it can target that in the CSS. So that's, the shortcodes are powerful, but I think with them, there, that is the one drawback, is that you really are kind of locked in once you start using them.
Yeah.
I don't know if is there does Hugo offer is there a way to avoid that from happening?
I think the problem with shortcodes is possibly the difference, right? Typically, everything that you are doing in the content is actually your blog post, right? That dot markdown files that you have. Possibly you don't see the markdown files, but every blog post that you're writing, the shortcodes go in there. So basically, if you do want to move themes or move away from the platform, actually those blog codes, the markdown files will continue to have the shortcuts. And that's the problem. I mean, it may not work across the themes or even across the platforms if you want to move away. And that was the reason I started preferring the actual embeds rather than shortcodes. But if the idea is to stick with a platform, I think shortcodes are really powerful, because they do allow you to insert HTML into post without really working on them, right? And I think that's the as a theme. So whatever as much as I understood, right? If it is something which is not really custom, it can be built as part of the template itself, right? Or as part of the theme itself as a partial. But that is a decision. I think some features just work well as shortcodes, with just the drawbacks that you mentioned.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to keep that in mind. And, we don't like lock-in with Micro.blog. We don't want people to be stuck. And if you use shortcodes too much, you can change them later. But yeah, if you move to a different theme in Micro.blog that doesn't have that, or if you export and want to move to WordPress, they're not going to work there either. So I think with shortcodes, they're really neat, but there should be a really big benefit to using them, so that you do a little shortcode and it does a whole lot for you. If it's just doing a little bit for you, then I agree. They probably should be avoided, just because it's one other thing, that is a compatibility issue. And if you're using a shortcode in a blog post, and then you go to a different theme, or you uninstall a plugin that provided that shortcode, you need to go back and fix that blog post, because your blog will not publish 100% successfully, because every time it hits that shortcode, you're going to get an error. So
yeah, it'll fail to build. It won't build past a certain point. Yeah,
and sometimes some things will. I'm not sure off the top of my head if I think sometimes some things will, but I don't want to speculate. But yeah, it can be a problem. The example that I used of the indie RSVPs, yeah, if you use that, but then you uninstall the plugin, you know, it doesn't know how to resolve that. So yeah, it's good to keep in mind, and maybe that's something we should document better also.
Why don't we we'll take one other quick question, and then we should probably wrap it up and give people a little bit of a break before the next session. Sherry was asking, is there anything us non-coders can do to support or help those of you who are writing cool stuff for us?
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
Go ahead, man.
No, you go first.
I was just saying, I think a place where we could build things that people would like to see. I think that's a good thing to have. I mean, right. So I think on our help page itself, if we have a place where something that I want in my blog, but it's not available as plugin yet, right? Instead of actually getting those as codes, right? Can someone convert this to plugin? I think that can be a good stream of feature requests of thought. Plugin requests.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ideally there's kind of like a cycle of like between people who are developing themes and plugins and people that are using them, kind of like a feedback loop of, you know, I want this, and then we'll try this, like iterating on different ideas. And that involves everybody, not just the person actually coding it up. And so definitely a lot of like I mentioned, a lot of the plugins that I played with and that I will probably do in the future will be coming from feature requests or whatever. And also I think there's a lot of improvements we could make to plugin management and just the publishing process and just kind of everything that's churning behind the scenes. And, you know, even if you're not working on a plugin, any, you know, feedback or sharing your experience of using this stuff, I think is really beneficial, especially as some of this is still really, really early, you know, with plugins and themes. It's not as mature as it will be, you know, let's say in 6 months or a year.
Absolutely. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up. I know there have been some really great questions, and this was a great talk, getting to share some ideas and thoughts and conversation around plugins and themes, which has been really exciting. I'm happy to be a part of it myself. I know how exciting it's been for me. So, as for people that that have gotten to take advantage of these plugins and themes, I'm sure they're all very, very happy to hear this conversation this evening. And I look forward to talking to more of you in the chat and later on tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gil. And thanks everybody who's been working on themes and plugins. It is, like you said, it's been really exciting to see all the activity. It's really cool. So thanks everybody.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye.